Once again, welcome everybody. My name is Marina. I'm part of the PMF team. We are Product Management Festival, for those that are not familiar with our organization. And today we're going to have a session for our product community. It's one of our main goals in the organization, and I will give you a quick overlook before the webinar starts on what we do. So as I was saying, our main goal is to make the product management community a little bit better and a little bit more united, so we don't do the same job twice. We're lazy like this. How do we do that? Our main driver are our yearly conferences. We have one massive conference in Zurich. It has around 1,000 people attendees every year. It's a 2-day conference. We bring product managers from all organizations from all over the world. We have, I think, 37 countries attending this last year. We have talks, we have workshops, we have booths. It's a huge event. The food is delicious. I know, I had to say it. And then other things we do is throughout the year, we also have our local PM nights, which are in-person, smaller group evening soirees kind of things, where we have a short presentation and then we have drinks together and share ideas and, debate with other product managers or minds alike. We don't discriminate here. Other things we do is our Trends and Benchmarks report. It's a yearly report we do where we run a survey with as many product managers from everywhere. It's our audience online and offline. And then we make a report with all the results. We are fairly known for our distinctive leadership surveys. We try to find leadership styles, good practices, and everything through questions, data-driven people. Then we have our INSEAD Product Management Executive Program, which is our 4-day course in Fontainebleau, France, or San Francisco. We run it 2 to 3 times a year, and it's a program that is for those senior PMs that are going to make that step towards executive or management, and they need the extra education. We bring very, very senior people, very good talks, very good material. We have it's a rather small group. We make sure that everyone passes the screening to be able to be there. So everyone that is there is bringing more to the table. We have our product executive circles, which are invitation only, closed, non-recorded sessions where executives can discuss all the troubles or all the success stories. It's a different kind of environment. What happens in that room, it stays in that room, but it's a safe space and it's very insightful. And finally, we have what we have here today, which are webinar sessions. We have them to make sure that the community is with us throughout the year, so our partners can share their success stories, or sometimes not so successful, but we want to learn from them as well. So thank you for being here, and hopefully I hope to see you in other of our many initiatives. And now I will not delay myself much further. I will introduce you to our speakers today, Thom and Amrit. They're from UserTesting. They're super experienced consultants, and I will just let them get to their part of the power of human in. Oh, sorry. So yes, thank you so much. Thom, Amrit, so nice having you here.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. So I will share my screen. I'll try not sharing that. Can everyone see my screen first off?
Good. Looks good, yeah.
Let me move this out of the way as well, and I'll have my chat open too. So yeah, we'll have a bit of a chat today around human insights at every stage of the delivery cycle. The development is obviously part of those delivery cycles as well, so we'll be covering that off and how we speak about it. As you'll notice, my screen with everyone's faces is there, and the screen with the presentation is there, so I'll be going in between them. And apologies if you see the side of my head too much when I'm doing that, but I'm sure it'll be fine. As we go through today, we don't want it to be like a typical webinar with us just speaking at you for the next half an hour, 40 minutes. We want you to be part of the presentation and want you to take part in terms of the discussions, etc. as well. So you've got the chat that's available to you here. If you've got questions as we're going through, don't feel like you need to wait until the end where the conversation, where the questions are. Just jump in, put your hand up, shout out if you want to shout out, chuck it into the chat, and we'll try and answer it as quick as possible. We've got myself, Tom, and Eileen here as well, and obviously Marina's there too, so they'll nudge us if there's any questions, and they'll be able to pull them in too. So don't be too shy is the biggest thing. I know it's a Friday morning, but we'll get through this together. So just as we're doing that, what I want you to first do is think about what your spirit animal is and why that is your spirit animal. And we'll tell you why we're doing this. We did this internally a few months ago, and I found it quite interesting to see how people thought about themselves. So chuck what you think your spirit animal is into the chat. And Tom and I will do a bit of introduction into ourselves. So my name's Amrit Bhachu. I'm one of the CX consultants here at UserTesting, and my role really is to speak to prospects and clients and other people within the CX community and understand what their challenges are, where they're having problems, what tools that they're using, what they're doing with those tools, and how it all gets pulled together to deliver class-leading experiences for the different verticals that you'll all be working in. And Tom, I'll pass it on to you quickly.
Thank you, Amrit. Yeah, so I'm Tom, located in Berlin. I'm solution consultant for UserTesting. So what we usually do is we talk, similar to what Amrit is doing, talk to prospects and customers about technical applications of our platform, how people can run insight collections and all these things, run demos for them, and prove out our value. Thanks, Amrit. Pass it back to you.
Yeah. And so my spirit animal, I've always thought my spirit animal was a silverback gorilla. Not the prettiest of animals, which I think fits me quite well, quite gruff and grumpy all the time, which I think Eileen and Tom would attest to as well. Tom, you see yourself slightly differently. Sorry, what people see me as, what people have told me I look like is a warthog. Also quite a grumpy character in general. I do not often burst out in a song like Pumbaa from The Lion King, but I don't know if it's got something to do with my smell. I'm still trying to find that out from the people that have said it. And how about you, Tom?
Well, I always thought that my spirit animal would be something like a Labrador, since I, like Eileen, have a dog as well. And yeah, but then I run a test online. I realized actually my spirit animal is an owl for whatever reason. Yeah, ooh.
And so we've got a couple coming in the chat here. Marina is a cross between a panda and a seal. So you've got the mammal element of both of them, but you can go underwater too. I think that's quite a powerful. That's maybe more of a superpower, Marina. We've got a bear. We've got a horse. I'm quite interested to understand the horse as well. But yeah, have a think about what your spirit animals could be. I think it's a really interesting, an interesting way to look at yourselves. So today we'll look at the changing behaviours in society, the challenges in the delivery cycle, where Tom and I have seen in our experience across the industry, where we've seen the challenges. And then we'll talk about a bit about what we mean by lean experimentation when it comes to the delivery cycle. So the changing behaviours in society, just to sort of kick that off, I've pulled out some stats here from internet sales as a percentage of overall sales in the UK. And you can see on this graph, it starts off here in 2008 and goes up to sort of January of last year. And it's quite clear within a graph like this that behaviour change is inevitable as we get more used to digital, but it isn't predictable. So over the years, in the early sort of late 2000s there, you can see that there's some steady growth in those percentages. And we're starting to see some peaks. Those peaks are sort of growing in November time. Does anyone want to guess or want to suggest what happens in November that embarks on those peaks?
Skype?
Skype, yeah. So someone's put it in there as well. Black Friday. The Black Friday sales happen during that period of time. And so we see in sort of mid to late teens of the 2000s that those November spikes become a lot more aggressive. And in particular, marketing teams, etc., start targeting those November spikes to make sure they've got the right campaigns, etc., in place. They've got their deals, they've got their pricing in place throughout the year to make sure that they can show that in those Black Friday sales that the customers are getting a good deal. And so it's a very sort of technical way of going around things and making sure there's a strategy around that. But come the start of 2000, we know what happened to everyone. The pandemic hit. All of a sudden, we couldn't go into stores, we couldn't go into shops, we couldn't make the purchases we were used to making, but we all wanted to buy new things. We all wanted to do new stuff because we were sitting at home twiddling our thumbs a lot of the time. So that blew the e-commerce industry to pieces. Any strategies that we had, any plans that we had were in a completely different place. And it changed the way that we thought about things. It changed the way that we did things. And quite possibly, the majority of the e-commerce industry was not expecting this. They weren't ready for it, and they weren't able to cope with it. Those that relied on past data to make their decisions were struggling moving forward. And as we've come sort of to the other end of it, and we're waiting to talk about what's happened since, a lot of these industries have struggled. Thom, you've got some stats around the German side of things as well.
Yeah, the interesting part about what Amrit just said is as well that within that very, very short time, only the ones who actually reacted the quickest on that and could adapt to the scenario the best were actually who made it out of that COVID part quite unscathed and even grew tremendously. And then contrary to something like that, where at the end of the COVID time, where everybody was actually looking forward to get out of this entire scenario, then hit a totally different wave of different things. That has to do a lot with a change of geopolitical problems here within Europe, with the war in Ukraine, with the change of supply chains coming in from China, which were blocked off. And all these things, they all led to a total and at least from my point of view, quite unexpected setback in terms of finances. This part, which we see here, is a part of a study which had been done just recently here in Germany, and that measures actually how people perceive on a very personal level the impact of inflation. And what that study underlined, and it's quite interesting, is that the impact for people is for each individual measured much higher than actually the inflation rate indeed is. And what these numbers actually underline here is that people expect it to get worse, way worse, before it gets even better. One example of another scenario, unforeseen external with a massive impact on the entire industry, as well as on the way how people interact with things. Now, speaking about users and customers, maybe back to you, Amrit, and talk a little bit about the change for consumers.
Yeah, users. Absolutely. So when we look at the consumers themselves, as Thom was suggesting there's been a big seismic shift over the 2 years of the pandemic as well. Over 75s, and this is back in 2020, are using the internet more than before. So if we think about it, 10 years ago, the over 75s were 65. The ones that that's when the iPhone came out. They were maybe still working in their working lives. And so them being able to use internet more than before is not an uncommon thing. It's not a strange thing. So we're going to see a lot more where that age group over 70s, 75s, even over 80s and 90s over the next few years are going to have a bigger impact on how we target them. They're still going to have failing eyesight, failing dexterity, failing hearing. So how do we make sure that we're tailoring experiences for them so they're still able to do what they're needing to do? At the same time, when we're looking at that older age group, a lot of the local services are being shut down for them. Here in the UK, we know that a lot of local bank branches are closing down. A lot of local cash machines are closing down. So things that they would traditionally do in those areas, they're not able to do it in that physical environment. So how do we make sure it's as easy as possible for them to do it digitally? And at the other end of the scale, and for someone who's now on Monday anyway will be officially middle-aged, Generation Z is coming through. They're now part of the workforce. They have money to spend, and they're one of the most influential generations that we've ever come across. They're known as the sustainability generation. 75% state that their sustainability is more important than the brand name. And it's starting to have an impact where the Bank of America sees them as being, as their income is surpassing those millennials by 2031. Again, quite a scary thought for someone like myself. But they're also having an influence on these other generations. They're having influence on Generation Z, their parents, etc., because they're the ones that are pushing their views and their social media, and has a lot to say for that as well. Their views are getting pushed into these different generations, which means that sustainability, as an example, has had a bigger impact on these different generations as well. So we need to make sure, as different industries, as different verticals, that you're keeping up with your customers, that you're keeping up with their users, you're keeping up with the changes that they're going to be experiencing. It's not going to be easy to just look back at past data, but you're going to have to connect with these users and these customers a lot more often to make sure that you're designing and developing to meet their needs, to ultimately deliver your business's success. So really briefly then, I think we've got a quick poll here. How have you seen behaviours change over the last few years in your industry? And Marina, I don't know if you've got that poll to pull up. There we go.
There we go.
So we've got a few results coming through there. Yeah, the majority, nobody's saying not at all and I don't know, which is good. And we're having a good balance there between more or less and drastically. And I think that's really illustrative of what we're seeing, what we're hearing when we look at the research, etc., that's going on. So let's move on. There we go. What's stopping you from getting ahead? What are those barriers to success that you're seeing, that we are seeing anyway? I'm going to start at the start. I'm going to start at the start of my career and towards the start of Tom's career as well. Traditionally, it was a subjective digital product delivery approach. It was very subjective. Reactive research, reactive experimentation, reactive development. Mostly driven by quant data, more so in the last sort of 10 years, quant data has played a bigger part, but driven by business goals, driven by product owners, driven by C-suite members saying this is what we need to be doing. And every so often, we would maybe get this need for doing some qualitative human insights, gathering that research, doing those deep studies to feed into what we're seeing and what we're hearing. Tom, is that something that you agree with?
Absolutely. And usually when conducted research, the research would be conducted quite late in the project. Project focus would be very often decided politically. I mean, I think that is still going on, that somebody with a heavyweight in an org is saying, we're going this way, we developed this feature because I want to have this feature implemented. People almost like bribe each other to get stuff implemented in a certain way. The bigger the organization, the heavier these impacts and stronger the pushback for any insight collection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we are seeing when we're having these discussions with customers is, as Tom suggested there, it still exists to an extent. Yeah. Less so. We are hearing a lot, Tom, I think you'll be able to speak to this a bit more. We're hearing a lot of customers say that they want to be more customer-centric, but they're still having challenges of pulling in those customers. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, we do see actually a strong push from a lot of organizations for different reasons to put focus on customer centricity, yet a lot of organizations in reality are not there yet. Like with digital transformation, that is still a process ongoing and in movement, basically, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think then this is where I've split up the delivery cycle into 3 distinct phases here: strategic phase, design, implementation, development, and that live measuring the impact. your processes may be exactly these 3 phases. You may have more phases, you may have less phases. But what we've come to understand is it's a broad sort of buckets here that we managed to fit them into. Looking at the breakdown in that sort of planning and strategic phase, we have, again, we have this live data coming in. We have the CRM data, we have product analytics, we have survey management, but we sometimes lack, or most of the time we lack this, what is it like to be my customer type of data. We don't have these insights as often as we want to. And that's a challenge within businesses. Within that then, time is always a big thing. There's always a drive to fit into development sprints, sprint cycles. The prioritization, as Thom mentioned there, because people are driving from the top, because it's those product owners, because it's those C-suite members, it's subjectively driven prioritization, which in itself makes it solution-driven process as well. When it's a solution-driven process, it stifles innovation, if this would let me. There's a problem that exists. The data tells us there's a problem, but we don't understand why that problem exists. And we don't always know then that the biggest value ticket item is being prioritized efficiently. How do we know that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck? How do we make sure that our designers, our developers, our strategic teams, our CRO teams, etc., are focused on the right things to be able to deliver business value? How do we make sure that we're supporting innovation? I'm not just talking about innovation in terms of virtual reality or augmented reality and stuff like that. Innovation within design structures, going from a grid of 6 to a grid of 12. That's a big change for an organization. But unless we're able to push the boundaries, we don't really understand if it's possible. Thom, I don't know if you've got anything to add into there.
I was just thinking that one of these things, and you just mentioned that is time. So the problem for many is to reach out to exactly the customers they have in mind, their personas. And what I remember having seen very often when talking to designers is there are very often persona sheets existing. They're printed out nicely. They are related to somewhat nicely. It's just that these things are not really alive. So they are existing more or less like posters on a wall where they collect most likely dust, but don't have a really huge impact.
Yeah, there's a client I was working with recently, and I actually did some work when I was in my agency role as well with the same client. And the personas that we created for that client 5 years ago were actually in the background of that client's call when I was looking at it. And I found it really funny because I knew exactly the names of the personas that they were using. But it shows that companies, these large organizations, are still looking backwards rather than looking forwards. Mm-hmm. Does anyone, just really quickly, does anyone disagree with what they've seen here? Do you see it in ways within your ways of working? A quick yes or no on chat, or a quick shout out in the live version's fine here, or a thumbs up or something maybe,
or thumbs down,
or a thumbs down. Sorry, I biased the question there.
As long as they are thumbs.
Yeah, awesome. So then what we're seeing in that design phase as well, I'll go through this really quickly. Again, time. So this concept of time is one that's reoccurring that we're hearing a lot of the time here. We need to get the information to development when we're doing our designs. We can't spend too long. We put an estimate in. The developers are waiting on this. We need to push forward time-wise. Again, because of what's happened at the top level, that strategic level, we've been told what the solution is already. So our design is already subjective. We design against best practice. We design against what we like in other areas. We design against what we see our competitors doing. And what that is where we're design driven by bias, and that's where we're stifled by innovation as well. I've heard lots of stories. I heard another one yesterday with a client where they get told that, oh, that competitor over there is doing that. We need to go and do that. We need to go and copy what they're doing because that's clearly the best looking one. That's, to me, the one that works the best. And when they go and start copying it, I've heard of one of my old bosses had this conversation at a conference where a lot of people were copying a single solution. And when he spoke to that other team at one point later on of that solution, they were saying, actually, it's not performing as well as we want it to. We're going through a vigorous testing to try and improve it because it's actually performing worse than our previous journey. And so you don't know what's going on when we're trying to just copy what our competitors are doing. We don't actually know how successful it is without actually doing some digging into that. A big part of this as well is we always forget this. I think this is the biggest thing within the development, design, delivery cycles. We forget this element that we are experts. We are digital experts in each of our individual roles. And as being experts there, digital experts, we aren't the end user. We're not the end customer. Our bias gets applied from that expert's perspective. And sometimes we pull it up, but my mum can do that, my dad can do that, my granddad can do that. But we're still experts, so we're still biasing what they are saying and what they're doing. So we need to try and get away from that. We're experts in our product, we're experts in digital.
There's also this element to that very often you take best practices as an excuse not to take a second look at things and see if these best practices, which are published and talked about, really fit that environment you're designing on. And very often that's also the case that you don't have enough time to test that, or at least think that you don't have.
Absolutely. And then in that delivery, in that live environment, we end up in, I've spoken to a lot of CRO teams more recently as well. We end up in this A/B multivariate testing churn. Tests are being run for test's sake. We don't actually understand what the problem is. We're testing solutions to that problem, and we don't actually understand what the impact of that is going to be. We can see the number on the live version going up or down, but we can't recreate that very easily. So it ends up in this churn. Test success rate typically is for CRO testing is between 10 and 15%. We don't want a high success rate when it comes to CRO tests, but we want to be innovative when we're trying different things as well. So if your success rate is around 10 to 15%, that's a good thing. But you need the context, you need to have that understanding. You need to make sure you're focusing on the right things at the right time. You need to make sure that you're focusing on the elements that are going to deliver value within your CRO program. It's a very strong element, and it's something that everyone should be doing, but again, doing it in the right kind of way. And yeah, that CRO, that multivariate testing and the live data, it gives us lots of nice information, but it lacks context. So ultimately, I've used the wrong word there. It isn't information. It is just data. How do we get the context behind that data on a more regular basis? And again, we've kind of covered this already. Live data tells us what's happened in the past. It can't easily predict what's going to happen in the future. It can't help us predict a pandemic. It can't help us predict how people are going to act in a pandemic. It also can't help us when we're looking at the cost of living crisis that's going on just now. It's going to be really difficult to pick our way through this. We can go look back at what happened in 2007, 2008. But again, we've got a lot more around us now. We've got a lot more access to digital items, digital features. A lot of the high street shops, etc., have closed down. How do we come out of this in a different way? How do you plan for success in your individual industries? Again, Tom, I don't know if there's anything to add in there.
There's this one thing. It doesn't answer you why certain things have been decided in a certain way. So why does somebody prefer a certain solution over another one? You just know that apparently something somehow magically performs somewhat better than something else. And you cannot even be really sure if you compared the right things in that case. Yep.
Absolutely. And I found this was from a CPSQ webinar that was done just before Christmas. And in 2022, their prediction was unsuccessful development projects cost companies approximately $260 billion. So those are projects that have been surfaced. A product owner or a project manager or a C-suite member said, this is what we're going to focus on. This is what the solution is. It's gone through design. It's gone through development. They've got it to a point where they can launch it, but it's not the right thing to launch. So they've killed it. Or they've launched it and it's not had any impact. So they've killed it. $260 billion. That's a lot of time and a lot of effort that's wasted within that $260 billion as well. So why are qual insights, why is qualitative research not always seen as being integral? I think we've got a poll here as well, Marina. But again, if you guys have got some thoughts on this to quickly chuck it in the chat, we've maybe got 30 seconds just now to put that kind of stuff in.
I don't think we have a poll for this one, but for the
Okay,
next
no problem. No problem. If you guys just maybe in the chat, if you want to put in some questions around that, that'd be great. Some answers, sorry to that question around that, some guesses maybe.
Maybe we should also just briefly mention out the difference between qual and quant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Want to do that?
Yeah, let's fire in.
So I interrupt you while drinking.
I will let you cover that while I take a quick drink, Tom.
All right, so quantitative data is typically something coming in from surveys, CRN systems, and things like that. And qualitative insights answer all these questions behind the what happened. They answer the why reasons. So with that, for qualitative insights, you usually need a smaller setup of participants. You don't have to find like 40 in order to get some significancy. And instead of that, you can just talk to 5 to 10 peeps and you already get quite a lot of insight from there.
Absolutely. Cool. Let's have a wee look into this then. As a researcher, as a qualitative researcher, I've been doing this for over 15 years now. Despite my youthful good looks, that I have been doing it for that long. And over that period of time, I have heard every single one of these excuses. Tom, I don't know if you want to go through some of them.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite because there are so many excuses that it even fits a nice calendar arrangement, starting with the beginning of the year when everybody is still a bit tired, that we need to figure, first of all, our roadmap. I really like this one. Roadmap is always a killer argument in everything. So you just push it away and need to figure out the global strategy. Then there comes also the reason, is there budget for that? Do we have the right tools? Let's talk about tools. Let's discuss budget. Let's compare budget. What do we spend? And then already a month is gone. Then talk about test methodology. Who knows it better and why? Again, it's a kind of nice group effort usually. And then when the summer comes, well, then there's a problem. We actually lack so much time right now. Now we really need to launch something because we are actually half the year is gone. We need to push out something in the door. And this is something, I think this is quite familiar for anybody who has anything to do with digital products. Time passed. Now it's time to stop playing and we have to launch something to get it out the door. There is no time, by the way, right now for testing. We can still do everything after the launch. It's one of my favorite topics, actually. We can still change the traffic much later. And then at the end of the year, well, sorry, we have to stop. Everybody who can make a decision is already in Christmas mode and gone. So maybe let's do that all over next year. With that, I give that back to you, Amrit.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a common theme that runs through a lot of these. And the common theme is, again, time. It takes time to do research. In people's minds, it takes time to do research. So they're always pushing back and doing it. They're always wanting to wait to the last moment to do it. If they can avoid it, they want to avoid it. But it doesn't always need to be the case. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a second. But as researchers, we've brought this on ourselves as well. We've done a lot of this ourselves over the last, in my 15 years of doing it. We want to be seen as superstars. I've made these mistakes. We want to be seen as superstars as we're doing it. So when someone asks us to do a piece of research, we want to do the best piece of research anyway that we can. It needs to be of that academic level. It needs to be thorough. It needs to be wide-ranging. It needs to get into all the, I don't know if it translates well across Europe, but in Scotland we talk about the nooks and crannies. We need to get into all the wee crevices to make sure we find everything. And to take that amount, that takes time to do research in that kind of way. We want to get buy-in to do more research at the same time. And so, yeah, we want to be the superstars. We want to show how amazing we are. But we still get pushback when we act in that kind of way. One of the reasons of that pushback is the cost and the time. So this was a typical rate card that I would give to my clients when I headed up my UX team in my last agency. And we would quite happily charge roughly, it worked out about 13,000 euros per research study. And that would take on average 16 days of effort. And because of the recruitment, that would usually be over the course of a couple of months. So 2 months with 16 days of effort and 13,000 euros to deliver value, to deliver insights. And everyone loved the insights that came from the research that I did. Everyone loved the research that my team did. But very little times did a client come back and say, right, we'll do that again in a couple of months. Very few times did that happen. Thom, is that something you've seen as well?
Yeah, there's one thing I actually wanted to pick on, looking at the comments here in the chat. Very often, and this is something we haven't mentioned, I think, it is this conversation like, is it either or? Is it either quantitative insight collection or qualitative? Which one is better? Which is a totally wrong question in the first place, I think, right? And I think that clicks with the people here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's motor on time-wise.
Speak faster, Amrit.
I'll speak fast. I'll speak fast.
I actually had a quick question on this.
Sure.
What you were mentioning, when as consultants, when you are hired to do these kind of projects and everything with the testing and analysis and everything, what's the percentage that companies normally apply what you come up with?
Great question. And it actually comes on to the next slide, Marina. So that's a great segue. It's like you've seen the slides maybe before. So as researchers, one of the problems that we have is we rarely talk, or sometimes we don't even understand the business value metrics. So we're always talking from a verbatim comments perspective. And this is why people love the research that's done, because they can see people interacting with their products, with their services, with their websites, apps, or whatever it is, and they can take that away and they can really feel what people are saying. But I think some of the comments down here have illustrated the qual versus quant conversation. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, we've lost a slide. Let's go back slowly. There we go. It's only 6 people, or you've only tested with a few people. So someone's mentioned statistical significance. That's sometimes a pushback that we get, and it makes it difficult, especially speaking to C-suite, to have the conversations. So we need to start thinking about things in metrics when we're doing this kind of research, when we're getting these kind of experiments done. It's often seen as the only option to get user or customer feedback. That's a big thing. We don't always get to speak to the people in the way that we want to speak to. We think this is the only way we can do it. And to address your question there, Marina, in terms of what people act upon, it's usually low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So we've done this deep research study, has covered all these different areas, but normally it's just the stuff at the top level that's covered, that's actually completed. The rest of it gets chucked on the back of a backlog normally, but that's not really much use to us, because the further away the way that we get from that point in time of having done that research, really the rest less relevant it becomes, because so much has changed, so many behaviors have changed, so much development has happened. And so when we get to that point in time, we need to really refresh the research that we've done. So this can be seen as being inefficient. We need this kind of research. I'm not saying we don't do this kind of research. We need this kind of research, but it needs to be better supported by everything else that's going around it. And the other part of it is that we normally don't have a lot of researchers within our teams. We have more designers, more product people, but very few sort of researchers in comparison. We have a lot of developers, etc. as well, but very few researchers in comparison. I am going to move on quickly, Thom, unless there's anything else you've got to add.
No, let's talk about lean.
Let's talk lean. Yes, so lean experimentation. Really quick analogy from me here. A Formula One car is a great example of an item that collects data. One of the most expensive and industries in the world, sports industries in the world for certain. Billions of dollars get poured into it. Every single surface, every single element on this car has some kind of sensor on it that generates data. That data is used to make improvements to the car, and that data is used to design the next car, the next feature, the next upgrade. But none of that data matters if the driver says that I'm going around that corner, I want to be able to drive around that corner at 70 miles an hour, but I can't because the car won't let me. The data only becomes valuable when you tie it with the insights of the driver. That's what creates knowledge. That's what creates something that we can improve on. Is that qualitative and the quantitative coming together to drive into delivering value. And so this is where we start talking about continuous experimentation. The business goals, the quantitative data and the qualitative data, all coming together. Not one element is more important than the other, but we're always pushing forward in that kind of manner. Again, Thom, I don't know if you've got something to add in there.
No, just nodding and keep reiterating. Yes, yes, that's what I meant.
Awesome. And so we've come up with, when we're speaking with our clients, we always end up in this, in the traditional way of working, of the designing. Thom touched on it. And at the end, we'll maybe do some testing. But when we get to the end of a cycle, it's too late. It's more expensive to make changes. We can't go back and change something that happened in the first sprint. So we make compromises. When we make compromises, whatever we put live isn't the right thing to be put in live. It's not going to generate the value we thought it would generate. That's how we get that 280 billion worth of waste, essentially. So we want to flip that around and have this test to design approach. Get feedback before we get too far ahead. Testing more often means that tests are simpler. You don't then have to spend 2 months setting up a test. You can set up a test, get feedback, and do quick analysis within a few hours. That's often enough to help us make more objective decisions throughout our process. And doing that regularly then gives us robustness as well. It's not one test with 6 people. It's several tests with 5 or 6 people on that feature, on that page, on that item. That gives us robustness in our results. That gives us confidence in our results.
And it doesn't stop when you launch successfully anything. It just starts, keep going on. That's a never stopping iterative process, right?
Absolutely. And that's where it starts tying into CRO programs, etc. from that point of view too.
Yeah.
We want to keep improving. We want to keep ahead. We want to drive innovation. This helps us drive innovation. We'll talk about that a bit more in a second as well. I love this term. This actually came from one of the clients that we work with. This idea of we can do experimentation in a scrappy, not crappy fashion. It doesn't need to be perfect. Every time we run a test, it does not need to be perfect. And we can get these simple insights with a sort of 6-step plan, identifying the focus, then identifying what the simplest thing to test is. Often the simplest thing to test, especially in those early phases, is already out there. We don't need to create something. We don't need to put our mouse to a Figma or a mouse to an Adobe. We don't need to get the developers to start creating prototypes or creating MVPs. We can go and see what our competitors are doing and test that. We can go and see people beyond our industry and what they're doing and test that. So we think about a menu system, and a menu system isn't unique to your product or your website or your app. We can go and test a menu system anywhere. We can get feedback on it and deliver it, then build that into our next phase of design. So working in that kind of way helps us move forward and helps us be more innovative. We define hypothesis. When we start defining hypothesis at the very start of this, that hypothesis will evolve as we learn, and that hypothesis will then help drive into our CRO testing as well. So we're not jumping around, we're not changing, moving the barrier, moving the goal. We've got a consistent theme throughout, and we know what we're aiming at. That then helps us tie into business goals. So everything that we're now doing, every experiment that we're running is being tied into business goals. And then the sort of bottom half, I won't spend too much time here looking at contributors to create the test and creating the testing. It doesn't have to be simple. We don't always have to target our exact audiences. We've got metrics and we've got analysis. You don't always have to analyze every single second of every single video. With shorter videos, it becomes easier. But if we can just pick up on the key points that are coming out, we are going to miss some of the analysis that's coming through. But because we're testing more often, the important problems are always going to bubble to the top. Mm-hmm. We can be more efficient in how we're doing these simple tests, and we can share those highlights. That in turn then starts buying us time for the researchers to do that deep research earlier on in our processes. That means in the strategic phase, the researchers can focus and feed into that prioritization. We can make sure then that we're focusing the right thing at the right time. And if we've got then designers, product owners, developers doing more of the iterative type of testing in the design phase and the development phase, we can be more comfortable with them making more objective decisions. So this is going to help us make those steps forward. I think proactive, lean, and objective design and development. That's the key terminology for me here. Thom, really quickly, anything from you?
Yeah, you validate with these kind of interjected qualitative insight collections in combination with all the quantitative stuff. You validate at each of these steps your work so far before you proceed to the next step. And you can actually vouch for that and prove out that to anybody else within an org by sharing all these insights. That's, I think, probably the biggest thing. And that's what I would like to talk in the next step. And 3 examples. Could you flip to that? So let me just talk briefly to the examples you see here. There are 3 typical use cases we see here, and very early in the phase. And this is something which is very successful with product owner and product managers who usually have like huge backlogs of features at hand and have to make a decision which one gets a higher priority to be developed in the next sprint or within the next couple of story and within an overarching epic and so on. And this particular test methodology is based on a prioritization matrix, which means that people take features from cards, drag them into a matrix between, I don't use that often, I use it every day, this is not important to me, this is super important to me, place them and talk why they ranked these features in a certain way, which gives feedback super quickly and easily to a product manager. Maybe we can play that clip. It's just about a minute.
Right. We're looking to develop some new features and would love your help to prioritize these.
Price comparisons versus airline direct, yes. That's important for me as I'm very price sensitive.
So price comparison versus airlines direct, I think that is one of my favorite features. So I would definitely score that high in frequency and high in importance.
Often when I finish with Skyscanner, I will also try via the airlines direct to see what the difference is. So yeah, app. I mean, if the mobile web works well, is there any need to download an app and have another app on your phone?
I'll pause that there. Apologies, everyone.
Let's just skip that one. Let's skip that one. Since it's just similar material, and let's move to the next example. This one is then a step further where it's the idea from Eisenhower's matrix. That's basically the same concept exactly. Thanks for that backdrop. This next example is then about the validation of insights from others. We talked about this kind of fact that very often somebody says, usually a higher up manager, let's implement this and this is going to solve all our problems because our competitors are using that as well. In this example, it's just simply asking participants about their impression on customer journeys by using different other platforms. Maybe we just play 1 or 2 tiny snippets from that before we move to the third one.
You want to take a round trip from London to Lisbon on the 2nd of November up to the 4th of November.
Revise the search so I can click on it, click on X, and it disappears, which is brilliant. I don't have to click on it and then delete it, which is a little bit time consuming.
Why? Maybe you have to do that. Okay, so you have to put in a range of days.
Oh, but my seat selection.
I think that's good, Amrit.
Yeah. I'm trying to put it in full screen, but it's not going into full screen, so apologies.
And the third element to that is an example then at a bit later stage when you do have a lo-fi or rather higher fidelity developed prototype, which you're going to then test and then collect feedback on that. That's a typical UX use case. Maybe we just play this for a second as well.
Click. But the round trip to me wasn't really noticeable. It's a bit like faint. The color of it isn't really bold, etc., like the other color. And you've got the toggle. It's not really that noticeable. Round trip. I prefer it return. I think return is a bit more of the nature that I would use. You know, return journey, return trip.
Thanks, Amrit.
Rather than round trip.
Awesome.
There is one thing I would just like to emphasize in this kind of methodology, you do see the interaction with the experience, and you do see the face of the user. If you share this kind of feedback out to anybody who is in doubt about research results, this usually speaks for itself, because the people cannot deny that apparently users are having issues with things or prefer certain things. So this is driving decisions in a very easy way. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Thinking aloud is integral in that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, but
so really quickly as a wrap up there, design and develop against actual value metrics, pulling that the qual and the quant, the data and the human together gives us value metrics, and we start digging into micro conversions within that as well. We're always moving forward in that in the same direction. We've got a hypothesis to test against. The robustness we've spoken about, so rather than one test with 6 people, where people can maybe people who maybe don't have the knowledge behind what qualitative research is can start saying it's not significant. We've all of a sudden got 20 people, 30 people who've tested this element with. It becomes more efficient from a time perspective, and the research team then becomes more efficient and effective as well. Validation of tests should be more straightforward and faster to complete. So they're still doing those deep dive tests, but people have helped them along that kind of way. You can talk internally using value metrics. So again, it's changing those conversations. It's not just talking about verbatim comments. We're able to share the videos, and we're able to apply the metrics behind it. And you can have a greater impact on the product and business roadmaps. It helps designers, it helps the researchers, and ultimately it helps developers make sure that they're focusing on the right thing at the right time. I'll skip that just now, and we'll come back around to that in a second. So essentially we want to get to this point of innovation, fast, efficient innovation. And it's this whole idea of failing fast and learning fast. Fail early. The earlier we can try things and fail at them, we can build those into our next step and learn from it. And that's what helps us get ahead of not just our competitors, but everyone else in the different industries. And as my computer's going crazy, we've got a couple of things here. We've got another webinar coming up soon with the PMF team. Make sure you look out for that. We'll be looking at workflow platforms and integrations, how this kind of stuff integrates in to your ways of working, and how we can make this easier from a ways of working perspective. Thom, I don't know if you want to add a bit more into there as well.
Just one more thing to what you just mentioned. I think one of the biggest improvements one can do in using results from insight collections and research is to share that out across entire orgs. And this is definitely what we're going to talk about as an example as well in the next webinar, more in detail. Just one example from one of our large customers here in Europe. They do, for example, have public visitings for all of their team members across the entire company of user feedback. So every 2 weeks for an hour or so, they show just collections of videos. And the interesting thing is, as the lead researcher told us of that company, is that these not mandatory meetings have a bigger turnout than all hand meetings of their company. So that speaks, I think, for itself and for the impact this can have. Thanks.
Yeah. And stay in touch. If you want to scan our code here, you can get access to UserTesting to run a free test if you would like to. I think it's a really good thing to try out and see what you can do with it. QR code's there. If you have any questions, you can see mine and Tom's information. You can email us, or you can link with us on LinkedIn, etc. too. I know
Thank you very much, Amrit.
No problem. Sorry, Marina. On you go.
No, it's okay. No, I'm just listening. I'm very curious. Like as I did mention, we will send an email to everyone that enrolled today with the recording, and we will make sure to copy the invitation to the follow-up webinar for sure.
Great.
Awesome.
And I'm not sure if you guys have a couple of minutes, if anyone has a question, a quick Q&A, like 1 or 2 tops.
Absolutely. If anyone's got any questions, fire away.
Please just unmic yourself and be part of the conversation. We would very appreciate it. It's hard though, because I like the one question I did was actually a segue for the next. So
absolutely. So I was just going to say, can everyone sort of understand what we said there and where it could fit into your business and your digital team and your ways of working? Can you see the benefits of it potentially, or not?
I can see benefits.
I hope so, Tom. I hope so. Awesome. Like I said, you've got our details here. If you do want to email us any questions or jump in anywhere, feel free to send things out and we'll be more than happy to respond.
And then maybe we see you all again in the next webinar. That would be cool.
That would be very, very cool. Okay, then I would say that's about it. No one is asking any questions. Maybe they just are gonna send you like 10 emails with 10 questions to you guys, since you put your private information here. Let's hope so. And thank you so much, everybody, for being today here, and hopefully see you the next time. As I said, we will send an email with everything, so don't worry, you will see our faces again. And thank you so much, Thom and Amrit, for today, and UserTesting for having this amazing presentation.
No problem at all. Thanks for your time, guys.
Have a great 13th. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Great 13th. Bye.